A Short History of Immigration in the U.S. from 1776 to 2015. In 1776, Thomas Paine published his famous pamphlet, Common Sense, where he argued for an ideal of the future of the United States. This new world hath been the asylum for the persecuted lovers of civil and religious liberty from every part of Europe. Paine was writing about a foundational idea of our nation, to be a unique refuge for human rights, while willfully ignoring the rights of people who already lived in this new world. This push and pull of ideals and restrictive failures is at the heart of the United States immigration story. The United States has always been a collection of peoples from all over the world. Some came willingly, but many were brought against their will in chains, while others were forced off their land. The U.S. has often failed to reach Paine's ideals and failed to recognize and protect the rights of people who call it home. But America is at its best when we expand citizenship to those who are already a part of this nation. And whether or not you know any immigrants, the politics of immigration should matter to you, because our immigration policies are not just about who gets to come and stay in our country. They are about who we are as a nation and who we want to be. This short timeline of the immigration story in the U.S. will be a reminder of that fact. 1790, the Naturalization Act of 1790. This was the first law by Congress to grant national citizenship, but naturalization was limited to free white persons of good character, thus excluding most of the people who resided in the new nation. 1884, potato famine and Irish immigration. The devastating famine that struck Ireland sent waves of immigrants fleeing starvation to the shores of the U.S. While some welcomed the newcomers, a wave of xenophobia led to the 1855 creation of the secretive American Party, also referred to as the Know Nothings. 1868, ratification of the 14th Amendment. Only after the Civil War did the nation shift its notion of citizenship. The 14th Amendment not only expanded citizenship for former slaves, it also established birthright citizenship. If you were born on U.S. soil, you are automatically a U.S. citizen. This fundamental change forms the basis for citizenship in the U.S. today. 1876, Chai Lung v. Freeman. In this case, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned a blatantly racist California law and importantly established that immigration enforcement lies with the federal government. 1882, Chinese Exclusion Act. Following the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, which Chinese immigrants helped build, Congress passed this racist legislation to bar all Chinese laborers from immigrating to the U.S. The act would not be repealed until 1943. 1886, Statue of Liberty is dedicated. An iconic symbol of freedom the world over, the Statue of Liberty becomes part of America and inspires Emma Lazarus to write The New Colossus, the poem that will be affixed to the statue in 1903. 1891, Immigration Act of 1891. This act created the first government agency dedicated to immigration, the Bureau of Immigration. In 1933, the agency became the Immigration and Naturalization Service, which remained until 2003 when it was reorganized under the Department of Homeland Security. 1892, Ellis Island opens as an immigration station. Ellis Island became a famous gateway to the U.S. and would see some 12 million new Americans come through from 1892 to 1954. 1898, U.S. v. Wong Kim Ark. Wong Kim Ark was born in the U.S. around 1873, but was denied re-entry in 1890 after traveling abroad, when the government cited the Chinese Exclusion Act to bar his re-entry. Ark took his case all the way to the Supreme Court, where they reaffirmed that he was a citizen because of the rights granted him under the 14th Amendment. 1910, Angel Island opens as an immigration station. Angel Island, just off the west coast, acted more as a gate, keeping many Asian immigrants out. 1917, Immigration Act of 1917. Brought on by an increasing wave of nativism, the 1917 Act dramatically limited the number of immigrants that were allowed to enter the U.S. 1921, Emergency Quotas Act. To block Jewish immigrants fleeing persecution in Eastern Europe, Congress passed a quota system to dramatically limit immigration from anywhere besides Northern European countries with white Christian immigrants. 1924, Immigration Act of 1924. This act further lowered the quotas and reduced the total number of immigrants allowed into the U.S. and barred all immigration from Asian countries. 1939, U.S. turns back the MS St. Louis. Told to get in line and wait their turns, the U.S. turned back more than 900 Jewish refugees from Nazi Germany. The decision was a death sentence for over half the passengers. 1942, the BRACERO program. In response to labor shortages, the U.S. tried to lure temporary workers from Mexico with the promises, though rarely kept, of good working conditions. 5 million Mexicans lived and worked in the U.S. under the program, which lasted until 1964. 1948. The U.S. adopts the Universal Declaration of Human Rights at the UN. Article 14 of the Declaration said, "Everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution." 1951. United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees is formed. Signed by over 140 countries, the UNHCR was the first international body to help resettle refugees around the world, but the United States did not sign until 1967. 1963. President John F. Kennedy calls for immigration reforms. A descendant of a once vilified immigrant group, President John F. Kennedy gave a speech calling for reforms to the U.S. immigration system and declaring the still in place 1924 quota system, quote, intolerable. 1965. Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. Signed by President Lyndon Johnson in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty, this act did away with national quotas and emphasized family reunification, a principle which still guides our immigration system today. 1986. Immigration Reform and Control Act. Signed into law by President Ronald Reagan, the law was a bipartisan immigration compromise which provided a path to citizenship for some 3 million undocumented immigrants already living in the U.S. 1990. The Immigration Act of 1990. This act increased the total number of immigrants allowed into the U.S. each year, created the visa lottery, and began the Temporary Protected Status Program. 1994. California Proposition 187. Pushed by anti-immigrant organizations and politicians, Prop 187 was a draconian act against California's undocumented population, but was eventually overturned by the courts. 1996. Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act. Signed by President Clinton, this act further criminalized undocumented immigration, making deportations easier while making it harder for immigrants already in the U.S. to adjust their status. 2001. DREAM Act first introduced. The act would put young undocumented immigrants on a path to citizenship. Despite numerous bipartisan attempts, being reintroduced every single year since 2001, and passed by different houses of Congress at different times, it has never become law. 2003. Formation of the Department of Homeland Security. Following 9/11, the government reorganized the federal agency responsible for overseeing immigration policy and enforcement under the Department of Homeland Security. 2006. Immigration Reform Flounders. In 2006, the Senate passed a bipartisan plan for immigration reform with a path to citizenship, but the bill was not taken up by the House. The Senate tried again in 2007, but was unable to pass the bill a second time. 2010. Arizona's SB 1070. Starting with California's Prop 187, a growing xenophobic movement worked with the anti-immigrant lobby to pass restrictionist bills at the state and local level. Examples proliferated in Alabama, Georgia, Texas, and elsewhere. The most infamous example is Arizona's SB 1070, the Show Me Your Papers law that attempted to turn the entire state's law enforcement apparatus into immigration enforcement. As with similar laws, the court eventually overturned much of the law, declaring immigration to be a federal issue. 2012. Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. After intense grassroots pressure from Dreamers, President Barack Obama signed an executive order granting protections for undocumented youth. 2013. Gang of Eight attempts immigration reform. In 2013, a bipartisan group of senators once again passed an immigration reform compromise providing a path to citizenship for immigrants already living in the U.S. The bill was passed by a supermajority of 68 senators, but was not taken up in the House. 2014. Deferred Action for Parents of Americans. Following the failure of the Gang of Eight bill, President Obama tried to expand DACA and protect the parents of U.S. citizens or lawful permanent resident children from deportation, but it was blocked by the courts. In our next video, we will go over the many changes of immigration policy under the Trump administration. Want to go deeper and learn more? Check out our website, americasvoice.org. Make sure to subscribe, like, and comment to see the next video in the series, and so that others can find this video as well.